Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another interesting conversation. We have been trying to look at different processes, laws, policies, practices that are being followed in different countries. And today I have joining with us Aleena from Pakistan. Aleena's pronouns are she and her. And I would also want to do a quick introduction about Aleena. She has completed her LLB degree in 2020. She has trained as a practice, and she's a practicing lawyer in Pakistan right now. She works on a broad range of legal topics, which also include harassment at workplace, data privacy, and constitutional rights. She's passionate about gender equality and inclusivity and advocates for issues which she feels strongly about, supplementing such advocacy with her legal knowledge and practice whenever possible. First off, thank you, Aleena, for joining us. We are very, very excited to have this conversation with you. Um, our I think our laws are a little bit similar, yet they feel different. I think the conversation I'd like to begin with by asking you, as far as harassment and discrimination is concerned, what are the kind of broadly the laws that exist in Pakistan, and if you could also throw some light on whether these are civil laws or criminal laws, or are they a mix of both kinds? Yeah, over to you now, Karina.
Thank you so much, Shivangi. It's a pleasure to be here and to be speaking about something which I consider is very important, of course. Um, and yeah, so just to give a sort of a overview of the legal regime in Pakistan in this regard. So I'll speak about harassment first. It is covered. So we have our criminal side of the law, which is covered in the Pakistan Penal Code of 1860. That includes, so there is a provision for sexual harassment of women, and this one is particularly only specifically for sexual harassment of women. And so this is section 509 of the Pakistan Penal Code. And basically how the criminal procedure would run is that if an incident occurs, you file a complaint with either the police, or there is also a route which you can take, which is filing a direct complaint with the court. So whichever lower court is dealing with this, has the jurisdiction to deal with this issue, you can file a direct complaint. Because of course, one other challenge that comes around in places like Pakistan is that the non-cooperation of police sometimes is there as well. So that's just a brief background on the criminal law. And then in 2016, the penal code was also amended to add section 377A, which deals with sexual abuse of people who are under the age of 18. So that would mean minors and children. And so particularly, and in this case, the perpetrator can be, anyone. The It's called a person whoever the person who does commit an act like that. And then we have a workplace harassment law. It's called the Protection of Women at the Workplace, or Prevention of Harassment at Workplace, of 2010. um, it is, in the title it suggests that it's for the protection of women only, but again in 2021 the law was sort of overhauled, and it was amended to include all kinds of persons who can be affected by harassment in the workplace. And also the definition of a workplace, or the employment arrangement, was broadened to a great extent, because initially the scope of what constitutes as employment under this law was quite brief. So now it virtually covers any kind of arrangement that there might be going on. So it's a much bigger has a much bigger scope. And what this law does is, it's a civil law. So it provides a mechanism to, for example, like these bigger organizations or corporations, whereby they can have a committee. And if there is an incident that occurs, then the victim can, or somebody on behalf of the victim can file a complaint with that committee. And then, there the whole procedure is given how they should proceed with investigation, giving their order. They also have to give the chance of hearing to the other party involved in the incident. And similarly, if the organization doesn't have a mechanism, then there is an ombudsperson appointed as well for this. And you can file a complaint before the ombudsperson. And they also, then the law also provides the procedure to how they can deal with a complaint like this. And then lastly, we have the cybercrime law, which specifically deals with issues that are related to the online space, and provides particularly for stalking, for harassment, for sexual crimes or abuse that may be going on uh, through the internet or any sort of electronic mode, basically. But of course, largely covers the internet. And again, this is a criminal law, and all proceedings under it are done by the Federal Investigation Agency, which is an internal investigation agency. They have the same sort of police as the powers as the police. So that's how this process runs. And apologies, there's also one more law which covers harassment in respect of transgender persons. So the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act of 2018, it specifically provides that there shall be no harassment against transgender people. And so that's sort of like the broad overview of all the laws that we have where harassment may be dealt with. And in terms of discrimination, so as I mentioned, the Transgender Persons Act also deals with discrimination, that there's a prohibition on any sort of discrimination against transgender people. And generally, for discrimination, the Constitution of Pakistan, Article 25 of the Constitution, provides that there shall be no discrimination against any person on the basis of their religion, their race, their gender, their ethnicity, and various other factors that may be involved. Um, and there is a lot of litigation in that regard as well. It comes up all the time, and the courts are very sort of activist in that regard. They look at where there may be discrimination happening, and then they strike it down on the basis of Article 25 of the Constitution. So that's the broad sort of picture in terms of discrimination and harassment of laws in Pakistan.
Right. Thank you, Aleena, for that. I think there's a whole lot of different kinds of things that do exist, and it's really nice to see that there are different laws for ensuring that different groups are also getting covered and their rights are also taken care of. As far as the sexual harassment bit is concerned, so you mentioned that the first set of laws came out in 2010, and then
Yeah, the
eventually it went
workplace.
through.
Yeah, at the
Right,
workplace.
the
Yeah,
workplace law, yeah.
yeah.
And then eventually in later on in the years to come, it went through a change as well. So was there any kind of a trigger or a reason why in the first place the law came out in 2010? And then was there a reason for those amendments as well?
So in 2000, uh, it's slightly sort of political as well, because in 2010, the government that was in Pakistan, it was the Pakistan People's Party, and they've always sort of historically had a stronger women's grassroots sort of activist base as well. So I think that it was just part of the sort of general movement that there should be a law for the protection of women at workplaces. And because previously, although it was covered in the PPC, but what this law does is that it provides a mechanism to the organizations or the employees to deal with it internally as well. Because in some cases, a lot of bigger organizations already have policies in place, but this law sort of mandates that you should have one in place. And then, even so, if the organization doesn't, then there is a state body which is there, which you can complain uh, before. And then the change happened. There was a case of an artist who had alleged that another artist had harassed her at a, I believe it was sort of a concert practice session or something like that. And when she filed her complaint before the ombudsperson in this regard, the case was initially dismissed because it was held that that was not a place of work, which obviously was quite disheartening. And to see that for her it was her place of employment. So then, there was advocacy in that regard, and then the definition was broadened to include virtually everyone, as I said before. So yeah.
And when you say everyone, you mean that all genders, including men as well as trans
Yes.
folks, everyone
Yeah,
gets
so
covered.
the definition of the person who would be harassed was just made to be person rather than woman or man, which is a much broader term. And obviously, there is yet to be. It was only recent. It was in 2021. So interpretation of the law and all of that also takes time sometimes. As issues come up before courts, there is more debate on it, more discussion. But on just reading the provision, it does include everyone.
Understood. And you also mentioned, I think, three things. One was that there is a committee as well,
Yeah.
where and organizations can constitute those and complaints can be handled by that body.
Yes.
You also mentioned a state body.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned about an ombudsman. So,
the
uh,
the
it's
the ombudsperson is who I was referring to, that the state actually has some kind of
okay, a
involvement in
body
it.
to,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
understood. So as a person, then I have the option or the choice to go to the committee itself within my organization, or I can choose to go to the state body also. Is that how it is?
Yeah, but if you go to the ombudsperson, obviously, they will assess whether or not you could have also gone to your committee within your organization. And then, if you're able to obviously establish that, whether there wasn't a committee or um it wasn't able to resolve it or something like that, then they will accept your case as well.
Ah,
Otherwise, they may also direct your organization to actually have a committee or proceed, but that's a very case to case basis thing.
understood. Understood.
Yeah.
And as far as different kinds of work structures are concerned,
Yeah.
does this law also cover students and the higher education system?
Yes, it does actually. When the definition was amended, they have added students specifically, that it shall include students as well.
Understood. Understood.
Yeah.
And
So
sorry, go on. Go
sorry,
on.
just clarifying that it is specifically provided that students will be covered.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of the actions that can be taken as well. So I'm just thinking that if at all it's somebody who has filed a false complaint, let's say, it can, I mean, eventually it turns out to be, like a false complaint.
Yeah.
Or if somebody is a student who has filed a complaint. So are there different kinds of actions or punishments that can be taken depending on the kind of a complaint, that comes up?
So there is a specific provision in that law that, for example, firstly, just for filing a complaint or just coming to the committee with that kind of complaint, there is a prohibition that you cannot take any adverse action against the person. Um, and I believe that if it's a false, there is no specific provision that states that if it is a false complaint, then how do you deal with it? So it's more like the process will run in this way, that there will be an investigation, and if they say that no, there was no harassment, then the matter ends over there. Then there is no adverse consequence to the person against whom the complaint was filed, obviously. because they will say that there was no harassment, and neither would there be an adverse consequence for the person filing the complaint. Um, Under this law, that is, of course. But otherwise, if an employer obviously chooses to terminate that employee for filing a false complaint, because that might then come under their general rights as an employee, as an employer. But under this law, there are no penal consequences for a complainant.
Okay. You also mentioned about trans persons law that was passed
Yes,
sometime in
yes.
2018, I think you said.
Yeah, yeah. And I actually, sorry, wanted to add to that as well that it was challenged last year, I believe. And so in Pakistan, there is a federal Shariat court, and that was constituted specifically to look at laws and provisions that may be in contradiction with the injunctions of Islam. So it was challenged. The Transgender Persons Act was challenged by a right-wing religious group on the basis of it being in contradiction with the injunctions of Islam. And the Federal Sharia Court also gave its judgment and held that it was in contradiction. So now that is currently in appeal before the Supreme Court. And until it is in appeal, the law will remain in effect, because the Constitution provides that whenever a federal Sharia court declares a law to be such, it will still be in effect as long as the appeal period is there. And if an appeal is filed, then until the appeal is disposed of or decided. So that's just a little footnote on the effectiveness of the law.
Understood. Understood. Thank you for that, Aleena. And when we talk about this law as well, does it cover the gender aspect, that is, a
Yes.
trans person?
So yeah, so the structure of the law is such that first it deals with recognition. And in terms of recognition, actually, this was it was a first of its kind law in this region specifically, because it covers self-perceived identity as well. And it covers that if you want to identify as a particular gender, then you should be allowed to do that. And on your, so we have a central sort of identification system. And we are issued these computerized national ID cards, and everything that you, any activity that you undertake basically in this country is then linked to your CNIC number, it's called. So on your CNIC number, you are also allowed, under this law, you were allowed to mark your gender as being X. So you don't have to have male or female there. You can have an X as being a transgender person if you wanted to. So it deals with the recognition of the identity first, and then it goes on to say that there shall be no harassment, there shall be no discrimination, they shall have the right to vote, the right to employment, the right to education, and all other fundamental human rights that are covered in the Constitution.
Understood. And does it also cover sexuality in any manner?
No, it does not cover sexuality. Only strictly only deals with your gender identity.
So these sound very interesting. And under this law as well, this is again, is this a criminal law? I mean, if somebody, let's say, harasses somebody, is there a
Yeah.
jail term prescribed? Or
Yeah. So under this law, the only penal consequence that is provided for is if if any person forces a transgender person to engage in begging or solicitation of any kind, then there is a, criminal consequence for that. Other than that, it would be a civil law, and only if there is an incident which can also simultaneously be covered under criminal law, for example, harassment or of any kind of violence, then that can be covered under the criminal law, under those criminal laws only. But this law in particular does not provide for penalties against these specific offenses.
understood. So you're saying that there's going to be then a clubbing of laws that depending on
Yeah,
crimes
yes,
committed, then those many
yeah,
laws then. Yeah,
exactly.
got it. Got it. And as far as the online crimes are concerned, you also mentioned that you have a specific law and also a body, I believe, that
Yes,
handles such kind of concerns. So,
yes.
online bullying and online harassment, is all of that covered as well under this law? So, can you throw some light on
Yeah.
this law?
Yeah. So there is the law is called the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act of 2016, and that covers. So there are two offenses provided in that. Again, so this is a criminal law, and all the proceedings under this law will be carried under the criminal law system in Pakistan. And the agency that I was referring to, so that's the federal sort of investigation agency that we have in Pakistan. They have various branches, and one of their branches that they deal with is cybercrime. So it's called the cybercrime wing, and under that you can complain to them. You can file a report as you do with the police, uh, that it falls under this offense of the this provision of the act. And the two offenses that are relevant here are, one is section 20 of the law, which provides that you cannot insult or harm the dignity or reputation of a person. So that would cover harassment or defamation or anything that affects or harms the dignity of a person. And you so for example, you cannot publish any online material which could be really anything which is harming a person in that way. And then section 21 is specifically for sexual crimes. So it actually provides specific cases, like for example, if you have superimposed somebody's face on explicit material, or if you have recorded any explicit material of someone, then that is covered under that section. And both of these sections, they cover adults as well as minors. Section 21 specifically uses the term minor, and with section 20, it refers to it implies that they are covered in the sense that the guardian of such person is allowed to file a complaint as well on their behalf. So that would mean that if there is a minor involved there, their guardian can pursue the proceedings on their behalf. So that's the so any kind of online harassment or sexual abuse would be covered under this law, and it is routinely used as well, actually. And they, in fact, in once when I was actually still a student, we were sort of given that there was a representative from the agency that I mentioned who had come to our school, and they explained to us how we can approach and what would be covered, and it covered nearly everything that you would see happening in the online space.
So, okay, I do have a lot more questions to be honest with you, given that there is a lot of similarities as well that I'm seeing, and wondering how the treatment is when it comes to minors and some of that as well.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll have to schedule another meeting with you for that. For
Mhm.
now, thank you so much for sharing all of these details in such a simplified manner. Before we really go away, Alina, I just have one last question for you that. And it's not a legal one, just from a general perspective and a futuristic perspective, with all the laws that are existing currently, uh, where do you see, it has progressed to, and what kind of progress you're seeing in future as well, as far as Pakistan is concerned? And do you feel like there are some gaps which also need to be filled eventually?
Yeah. So in terms of progress, I think whatever we have so far is good, because the when something is provided in the law, when there is a system in place for something, the very least that the assurance you have is that you are at least going somewhere with it. For example, with regard to the Workplace Harassment Act, when there is a system provided there, organizations and the ombudsperson, they are bound to follow that. And obviously it is challenging to have these laws implemented, but as I said, it's a starting point. And that at least helps you get your, sort of viewpoint there, or something, if it has happened to anybody, they can always approach the legal system. And in terms of gaps, yes, implementation does remain a challenge. Within these sort of bodies which are supposed to be responsible for the enforcement, there can be all sorts of challenges. There is social stigma that comes oftentimes when you uh, engage with this system, and that can really put off some people. I mean, I think I cannot quote direct statistics, but I think the general impression that we have with regard to approaching any formal proceedings when it comes to harassment, and it's particularly bad when there are children involved in it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of work that can be done on that end. I would put the system as being on a starting point, that we have started to uh, progress in the right direction, and the next step would definitely be to, keep pushing at it and keep trying to uh, have these laws implemented. And something like the Transgender Persons Act, for example, it is a rather unfortunate development that it was challenged and then also struck down by the federal Shariat court. And so, for example, there now the hope is that the Supreme Court, looks at it and says that no, it is not. The law should remain in place. So yeah, these are the kind of challenges and progresses. At the time when the Transgender Persons Act came out, that was a big uh, point of progress, because historically, obviously, transgender people have been oppressed, and this kind of recognition coming from the state is very important. Um, and nobody can rightfully discriminate them, at least, right? So they have that forum where they can have their voice heard. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And I also usually say this, that these are some of the basic rights that actually nobody should be authorized to give anyone or take from anyone. So these are
Absolutely.
just inherent. They need to exist. And it's
Yeah.
kind of sad that we, sometimes need laws for the protection of such basic human rights,
Absolutely.
in the first
Yeah.
place. But as you're rightly saying, I mean, sometimes we do need these kind of laws to exist, given the years and centuries, perhaps, of the discrimination and the trauma that has been caused also.
Yes.
So thank you for that really important point, Reena, and thank you for joining us. I'm so happy that we had this conversation.
Thank you so much, Shivangi. It was really, really great speaking to you, and for you to ask all the important questions that helps us think as well, and progress. Again, as I said, that's all we're fighting for now.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.